that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Malazan universe. Today I have for you the beginning of a sequel trilogy, which is now, as of February 2025, what is it called, a quadrilogy? It's 4 books now. And the second book should be coming out in April, which, by the time you're watching this, we're past April, but this is novels of the Malazan World. The first book being The God is Not Willing, by Steven Ericksons. This takes place 10 years after the Book of the Fallen. You don't necessarily need the Book of the Fallen to enjoy this. Of course, you'll not appreciate it as much without certain context, but you can certainly read it without it and be okay. Heavily, what's important to this book mainly is probably House of Chains. Karsa Orlong is introduced. As this book really deals with legacy and with the ramifications of actions that, we follow Karsa in the Book of the Fallen. He makes his promises to destroy civilization, but by the end of the series, he never really follows through on that. The last we see of him, I believe, is him talking to the dying man and then breaking the altar in that temple, and since then have not seen him. And the Crippled God ends, and we don't know what's up with Karsa, and we still don't because we don't see Karsa at all in this book. But we see throughout it ramifications of his actions. Alongside that, we get to see what the Malazan world is like now that the events of the Book of the Fallen is over. And how quickly people forget. And how quickly things can become myth. We have some returning characters, not that are very big, like Spindle. And Spindle was part of the Ridgeburners. And yet no one believes them. No one really believes that he was part of it. It's only been 10 years. But we mainly follow a son. I don't think it's a spoiler to say a son of Karsa Orlong by the name of Rant and his journey, as we also follow a bunch of Malazan soldiers and some mercenaries. It's a lot smaller cast, so in that sense, it's a lot more like Midnight Tides, or it's a bit more focused, and it's easier to follow, I think. Not that any of them are particularly hard to follow, it's just that you have less you got to keep track of. But I think this story, this came out in 2021, so it's been out for a while. But I think it's a fantastic beginning to a sequel. Even though it's not inherently a sequel. It does take place after the Book of the Fallen. And I do think it would behoove you to have read Book of the Fallen before reading this, though it is not explicitly necessary. But I would say, if you wanted to have a taste of Steven Ericksons' writing, but didn't know if you wanted to completely invest all your time into a 10-book series, this book, Guardians of the Moon, give you good introductions to how Steven Erickson will write, That being said, another emotionally poignant story, so wonderfully told, and you know, really jived with a lot of the side characters. Mostly in the rant portion. I mean, I enjoyed the military, but outside of a couple, none of them really stood out like in the Book of the Fallen. Um, but Gower, Nadrin, I loved them, loved them so much, and of course, there's a character. I don't want to say it in the non-spoiler section that was actually in House of Chains, which I didn't even realize after I finished the book and I was starting listening to, podcast interviews and stuff like that. Demisk, frick, I said it. Well, whatever. Demisk, he was in book 4. I would not mistake you or be upset with you if you did not remember who he was. Because by the time you get to the Crippled God, it's been so long since only book 1 of House of Chains that it's hard to remember those specific details. But he rounded up slaves for a long time. It's been 10 years. And even from House of Chains to Toll the Hounds, we somehow have a 7-year gap, right? So if you're thinking about that in terms of Damascus timeline, even the timelines of Malazan are kind of hard to follow. It's been 17 years since that happened, if we're following that train. So it's a little bit of like, people. Another thing that is a reoccurring theme, and we had this in Toll the Hounds a little bit. I had this. Oh, sorry, it was in Toll the Hounds, it was in Memories of Ice. And this whole idea of redemption. Can people be redeemed? What does that even mean? It's a fascinating discussion just on that topic alone. But it definitely is a topic brought up again here, along with innocence. And as maturity comes along, the loss of innocence and what a tragedy it can be. Which is also something that's been said elsewhere, but it's just kind of how it's told here, which is really well done. And I'm really excited to see where the sequel series will take us in the long run. But I think I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Steven Erickson knocked out of the park again. Absolutely. And it's well worth your time. And, I mean, if you want to stay in this world as long as possible like I do, then definitely pick this up. Now, I'm going to get into some spoilers. If you don't want that, then it's time for you to hit the head. The prologue, we get to see Dayless again. The girl that Carso is hitting on at the beginning of House of Chains. Oh. We have this guy named Elaid Theros, who's in charge of the Tablar, or at least this section of them. Also seems we have some themes of global warming. I know it's not the point of the book. You don't have to worry or anything if you did worry for some reason about that, but it is definitely something I picked up on. I don't know if that was the point, but there is a ice glacier of Amtos Falak that is cracking, that is weakening, and soon there will be a great flood, which also definitely not Steven Erickson's intention, but because of my age, I started thinking of Ice Age. Those animated films for children, the Continental Drift. But yeah, that was also an interesting start to the book, being like, it's a sure thing, this entire land is going to be soaked in the flood. Dayless is also a mother, and she had Bereth's child, so cool to know. Also a lad who's in charge of the Teblor. He has a bone to pick with Karsa because Karsa killed Elaid's father. Also, while we do not see Karsa in this book, we do not know if he's actually ascended to godhood or not. Because he was clearly starting to be worshipped by other people, which would seemed to imply that he was ascending. But did he accept it? I don't know. But we do know that people now call Karsa the Shattered God. And then we jump ahead to Book 1, Knuckles. Ulms is a cool person in the military, along with Spindle, who was in the Book of the Fallen. We also meet some other fun characters. Folibor Bear, I think, and Stillwater. Stillwater's an interesting character unto herself. Oh, never mind. My bad. Karsa refused to send, and he beats up his worshippers every time they show up and meet him, which only brings them more worship to him for some reason. We also have some other characters like Clay Plate, Annex, and Banger. But after a decade, already the Bone Hunter's history is being muddled. Then we jump over and we meet Rand. I thought I read it wrong. I thought I was tripping. I thought I was going insane. The book begins, or at least this part of it, has Rand's mother on top of him, sexually. She gets off. She regrets it. She tells him to leave. It's the best thing for him. Now, this does involve, again, repercussions for Book of the Fallen. The blood oil curse that Karsa had, when in that state, he had sex with Solaris, who is Rant's mother. And so Rant grew up, and he also had the blood oil curse. So he was raped by his mother. She did not mean to. It took control of her. But she did. I believe Rant is... I don't know how old he's actually supposed to be, but he definitely has the brain of a 15, 17-year-old. That's what it feels like. So it was rough to begin the story. He's drowning at some point, and Damask saves him. Again, Damask was like a slaver in House of Chains. He starts palling around with Damask, and Damask tells him about, good and evil. What does that even mean? And, the rape of they don't use the words rape, but talking about Rant explains what his mother did. And, sorry. It's just, every scene with Damask and Rand is a pretty powerful one, I have to say. Also, just fun quote, the most powerful constant is stupidity. Agreed. We also see the Malazan Empire is kind of crumbling. It's not obviously destroyed, it's still the most powerful empire in the world right now, but like with any great civilization like Rome, one day it eventually just falls. Not one day, it's a period of time where it just kind of falls off. And it seems like the Malazan Empire is now in that declining state. What are the reasons for that exactly? We do have Malik Rel in charge still. But Malik Rel is actually like a fairly competent leader. So I think it's a mix of things. A lot of things that made the Empire what it was are no longer there. Kelvin, Dancer, Surly, Dassam, Teshrin, all gone. Everything that made the Empire is no longer. And along with the new batch of heroes from the Book of the Fallen, all of them at least or seemingly, have fallen off and gone off to do their own thing. So, I guess, now the Malazan Empire is just kind of flailing away. There was a great epigraph on the present age versus all ages, and how the present age thinks it's the best, the greatest, the brightest, and the ages of the past are just the past. But everybody says that in their present, but our present will be somebody else's past, and it will fade away. That wasn't exactly the point of it. I'm just saying like that. The epigraph was fun. Okay, I'll leave you alone. We meet Gower, who's Lord of the Black Jack. And of course, him and Rant butt heads, but Rant, beats Gower, but he doesn't kill him. It's not even a thought in his mind to kill him. But before we continue on with that, Damesk meets a character named War B-Word. I don't like saying that one. I cuss like everybody else, but I don't like saying that one. So I'm not going to do it. But yeah, that character. We meet a character named 3 in Rant. Rant meets this character, and she kind of like possesses the knife that he has and says that she'll be with him forever. And then we move on to Book 2, Star Wheel. Rant meets Nilgan, who's a really fun character. I really love Nilgan. In the state of the world right now, we have new gods rising, decks changing, hold/warns being different. I think, because we have the hold tiles in Midnight Tides, then we move over to the card system in the Book of the Fallen, and now it seems to be changing to coins. So that's interesting. And that was really my only note in Book 2. I apologize. And move on to Book 3, Roots of Stone. We meet Deidasfana, who is Rand's half-sister. Rand challenges the Erd war leader, which of course is Theros. And challenges him for a battle to the death to protect Damesk's life, because that's another thing. Damesk in his life in the past 17 years, I guess, has had a big change of heart, or at least a lot of introspection in terms of where he stands with everything. And again, this is the theme of redemption, kind of like being brought through. And what does that exactly mean? Because Damesk takes it upon himself to get this boy to, to civilization, or to his family. And there's this moment where they're up on this hill, I think, and Damesk's like, I can't go any further. And Rand asks him to, and he decides to do it, knowing full well that that would probably be his end. Because they were going to want revenge, they were going to kill him. But he goes through with it anyway. And it's interesting, just the friendship that Damesk and Rand share. And it's a thing of, and there's no right or wrong answer. But redemption is such an interesting concept. There's so much packed into that, from religion to just day to day, or even some of our greatest pop culture things. Star Wars, Vader sacrificing himself for his son. Does that redeem him for all the Jedi, for all the people he probably killed in the span of 20 years? In between Revenge of the Sith, and all those children he slaughtered, all the way up until where we meet him? Up again in the original trilogy, does that erase everything that was done? Not really. But I think it's more important that in his final moments, he chose to do good. I think, that doesn't mean necessarily is forgiven of all past transgressions, but it means in his final moments, he chose to be better. In the same, you can't erase any mistake you've done, right? But it's in the past, it's done, it happened. All that matters is the present and what you choose to do with the present, who you choose to be in the present. Like, who I was at 16 is virtually, you can't even tell they're the same person other than how I look. But should a 16-year-old be chastised for what a 24-year-old does? Or should a 24-year-old be chastised for what a 16-year-old did? I don't know. This is a thing of, like, not to get, I'm not, like, political, I don't really care, but, like, part of the thing with cancel culture is, oh, you said something 15 years ago, well, then you must die. I'm exaggerating, but it's a thing of, like, okay, but a lot can happen in 15 years. A person's entire worldview, philosophy, mindset can change in that span of time. Or look at it another way. People want to play God, people want to kill who they want to kill, if they're deemed guilty, but it's like, think about some of your favorite fiction. Think about all the times that someone has been evil or antagonistic, and by sparing them, they end up committing some of the greatest heroic acts throughout an entire book series or TV series or movies, all because you decided you wouldn't kill them. And that potential is gone the moment you snuff out a life. You know what I mean? And so I don't think Damask doing this one good thing for Rand redeems him in the sense of, oh, everything you did in the past is just peachy dory. But it seemed like Damask, not just trying to win brownie points. I mean, for who? This isn't Christianity. This isn't, a God who will look at you and forgive you and, bring you into paradise. There are multiple gods and none of them really give a shit, right? So, the only person he really has to do this for is himself. But he's looked at his life. Seems like he doesn't like what he sees. And is trying to change. And I think ultimately, that's more important. I think at the end of the day, we all have stains. We all have things we regret. We all have things that we wish we wouldn't have done. Nobody here is clean. Nobody here is pure completely. Not by the time you're an adult, anyway. It's not. If you think you're perfect, you're deluding yourself. But before we cast judgment, would you want to be forgiven? Or at least given the chance to, Tone? For whatever wrongdoing you may have done? Should we not lend the same to others then? That's all I'm saying. But it's such an interesting thing that gets brought up throughout the series of this topic of redemption and what it can mean. Though I do think there is an underlying sort of atheistic theme to it. Not in this one. I think it's more just generally redemption. But definitely with Octavian. But we've talked about that before. But I think that's a different sort of thing to be discussed entirely. But in the idea that a mortal man, can they be redeemed? Obviously it depends also on the individual, because not everyone will ever forgive you. But I think that says more about them, you know. And even, it depends on what you've done, I guess, too. But I don't know. Slave trading, I mean, yeah, that's awful. But compared to what I've seen in the Book of the Fallen, honestly, it's a lesser evil than some of the things I've seen done in this series. So, I'm more willing to forgive that than some other things. So, but it's just one good thing he did. And it doesn't change the past. He's still guilty of all that. But I guess my point is that this book was his final moments. Right? This is him with all experience gained, with all knowledge he was ever going to obtain, up until the moment of his death in this book. And this is who he chose to be. So I think we just have to take that into account. And his final moments, and he definitely didn't forgive himself. And that's usually people worthy of forgiveness. That's the mindset. You don't think you deserve forgiveness. And that's how you know I think that you should have it. You know? Obviously somebody arrogant that's like, well, I should just be forgiven. It's different. But he didn't expect any forgiveness. He didn't expect any love. Yet Rand still showed loyalty and compassion. Unabashedly, no limit. Because that's who he is. I didn't give a damn about Damask before, but you can be damn sure that when I read House of Chains again, I'll be paying more attention to that name popping up. Being alone is what I fear. It's something that Rand thinks about, and I really understand that. Also, they say something about a Chagall assassin, which is like a change Jamel, which is interesting. So Tanith, who's another half-sister, speculates that due to the blood oil that Rand's mother raped and beat him daily. Is that the case? Let's move forward. But what's interesting, or I guess what's important to note about that, is that a typical person, an average individual, would indeed have done that to Rand every day. Keep that in mind. Also, we meet Nape, who's the third child of Na, which was Karsa's hound. So I mentioned what Tanith said earlier because we learn with certainty that Rand's mother, at the beginning of this book, when she did in fact rape him, was the only time she had done so. Which shows how powerful and how strong and resilient Rand's mother was. Because most people couldn't do that. She lived with him for 15 years, fed him, took care of him, with that blood oil curse surrounding her, and not succumbing. We just unfortunately start Rand's story at the moment that, after all that strength, she eventually gave in. But she fought hard for a long time, not abusing her child, not doing that. So it speaks volumes of her, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Also, maybe I just mentioned how much of a sweetheart Rand is. I don't think we've ever had such a sweetheart in Book of the Fallen since, like, Beak, maybe. And I didn't even really talk about Beak that much in Book of the Fallen, but I love Rand. He's so sweet, and he's like me for real. No, but I love Rand. I love him so much. He's probably one of my favorite characters. Just right off the bat, I love Rand. And now I'm rambling, so I'm gonna keep going. Also, we learned that Rand, I was wrong. He's only 15. Solaris, Rand's mom, talks to the Malazan soldiers who promise to heal her. Also, we didn't know before, but we learned with definitive proof here that Malik Rel is still the emperor after 8 years of peace since the end of Well, there was still some stuff going on after Book of the Fallen, but after some time, there's just peace and pretty much everywhere. Also, Stillwater's doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff. She's like, she can like kind of like hop in a warren and hop out like really quickly, and she goes into the warren of like dark or whatever. Or this might be Banger messing with her. Again, I'm not exactly sure, and I think that's on purpose. It just left ambiguous. But while Stillwater's in this place, she does see Anamander Rake. Now, is that fake? Maybe. Is it real? Maybe. Personally, I would like to believe that there's some aspect, of Anamander Rake out there. Just getting to chill in the afterlife because I love Anamander. And the last time we saw him was, I read him in 2 other books, in Forge of Darkness and The Fall of Light, but in terms of chronologically, we haven't seen him since Toll the Hounds, so I hope it is real. Damask's death is actually, it's rough, he Ranton says his goodbyes. He wakes up. There is a bear sniffing through this abandoned camp because the soldiers left him. And the bear's kind of ignoring him. There's a bunch of food all around that the bear can eat. The bear's not really interested in Damask. Damask keeps shouting at him. The bear's mother. Keep shouting. Keep shouting. So eventually the bear does come over and decides it can be food for her and her children. And so we end with Damask screaming, 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 and then dying. Some may say that's exactly what he deserves. And maybe you're right. But I also try not to revel in other people's suffering, whether they deserve it or not. Outside of that one instance where that rapist in the House of Chains where Karsa ripped off his penis, that was great. But in most circumstances, I try not to relish in people's suffering, even if they deserve it. But again, he on the one hand, he got to do one decent thing, but his death still was tortuous. Could arguably be deserved. But it was hard to read, because he had so sufficiently made me care about him, to where I did not want to see such brutality cast upon him. Maybe he did deserve to die. But I personally do wish it had been at least not a fucking bear, man. I apologize for cussing, but yeah, spear through the neck, something. No. But that's Malazan for you. But he was a great character, and Erickson really endeared me to him very shortly. And I adore the friendship he built with Rand in such a short time. I didn't write it down, but I think I'm skipping over it now, but one of the things that's actually crazy that really got a tear out of me, all of the characters are around. I think it was Gower. Did I talk about it? I don't know if I did. I don't think I did. But, Gower, Nilgan, brother to Gower, Rand's half-sisters, they're all talking to Rand. And at some point, he goes, they're trying to explain things to him. Oh, this is before they realize that he's still a child. But he asks them, what is rape? And Gower goes like, oh, shit. And it's just such a powerful moment. Because that's when they learn that he's actually not an adult at all. He's just a kid. But it instantly, like, makes everyone, like, more endeared toward Rand. It's actually one of his greatest abilities, it seems to be, is just garnering loyalty among people in such a short span of time. Actually, I know this is kind of a nerd thing, and not everyone's going to recognize this reference, but it reminded me of KOTOR 2, even though there's a very story reason for it. But your character that you play as, it was meant to be like a canon actual thing that you were just really good at making friends, at making people be loyal and trusting to you, which there is a reason for that, which you can play KOTOR 2 to find out. But I thought it was an interesting little comparison that Karsa's son is so good at making people, and he's not even doing it consciously, it just is happening. But I really enjoyed, everybody just immediately like, oh, this is a kid, and just like feeling this need to take care of him, a little bit, and it was nice to see. But that was earlier, so I apologize for forgetting to mention it. Also, something that was even the impetus for sort of these sequels in the first place, which does not seem to be the case anymore, which, now that it's 4 books, Erickson either found a way to bring it in, or something that will be its own standalone novel. I don't know yet. I guess we'll find out. But the cult of Coltane, the black-winged god, is now a major religion. Not just in 7 cities, but all across the world, the cult of Coltane has grown. And I do think this is meant to be probably analogous to Jesus and Christianity, because you start off in Jerusalem, which is a relatively small region in terms of like the entire world, and from there, you get all of Christianity, right? That's in like every country, there's a Christian somewhere, in most places. I mean, even in China, you got people being baptized in secret because it's more of an atheistic place. I mean, there's no like staunch rule that you can't be, but it's heavily looked down upon. So a lot of people do it in their like bathrooms. They'll like, get like baptized. It's a whole thing. Anyway, but I think Steven Erickson's whole idea with that is like, we read Dead House Gates. We saw the actual events unfold in that story. So how does that twist and change over the span of 17 years? I say 17 because it's 10 years after Book of the Fallen, but there's a big time gap somehow, because Toll the Hounds tells us it's been like 7 years. So, yeah. They decide it's time to make Rand a man, which is it? I don't know. Is it weird that that's like the way that you figure that out? Am I not a man? Oh, here. You want some honesty for a second? Something that makes me a little like, what the fudge am I then? Because I'll tell you, I'm where Rand's at in most of this book. Well, minus the rape. That's not happened to me. Um, so he has had more sexual interaction by the start of this book in a very bad way than I have had ever. So I have no knowledge. So am I not a man? Is that the defining factor of becoming a man? Is that final step? Because I'm 24 and that hasn't happened. So I don't know. But this is what it takes to make Rand like grow up. So him and Paik, which is another uh, Tablor, they do this action, and even in that, there's so much um, great emotional stuff going on where she's trying to be careful with him because like he has gone through rape, and she wants to make sure that he's comfortable and that she doesn't cause any trauma to like kind of pop up from that. But she does eventually do it. They do it, and he likes it, and I guess Rand is an adult now. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to make a joke about how I guess I'm not an adult. I mean, I pay taxes, but I guess I'm not an adult. Um, um, then we get like kind of like the big spectacle. I mean, there's a big battle that takes place near the end, along with the flood that eventually does happen, and we see that from multiple POVs, which is actually really cool. And we'll have like time skips like to go back and then go forward, but I think it works really well for that. But you know, it's just kind of a flood. I don't really have too much to add. It's a flood. It's devastating. It's bad. It's a flood. Um, but what I do want to mention is, you know, when they're all fighting, the Malazan soldiers, they find a Tablor with like, I think like her legs are blown off at that point. She's crawling, and she whispers something into the Malazan's ear. I forget which Malazan it was, and I guess she just asked them to burn down that Silver Lake city. Just burn it down, please. And actually, the Malazan soldiers follow through. Um, they honor her dying wish, which I think is really. That's another thing is like the decline of the empire and the decline of like the soldiers. Like in general, it seems like the soldiers are not as effective. Like they're not bad by any means, but they're not. It's not the same as it once was. But the technology is improving a little bit, so they don't really depend upon the Morinth munitions anymore. They kind of make their own, which is interesting. So there's a little bit of that development of the world there as well. But you know, also while Malik Rel's empire may be crumbling and maybe becoming more corrupt or whatever, there are still individuals within that within the army that are good. And so I appreciated that they honored this enemy's dying wish. We also have a place called Silchus's Last Vows. Cool. And Shadow Throne and Cotillion talk to Stillwater. And Shadow Throne goes, why do you even bother talking to this girl? But apparently Stillwater has a tattoo on her neck, which just means Cotillion. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, we get our one little cameo of our Kellivan and Dancer, and it's good to see them. I mean, it's good to know that they're still alive and kicking. I mean, I guess they are still gods, but even here, all these years later, they're still around. As we near the end of the book, there's a fun, really nice little conversation between Storp and Bleak. I haven't said much about Bleak, but Bleak is one of these soldiers, and he blames himself for a lot of the deaths of other people, and Storp just tells him why he's stupid, and it was a nice little moment. I forgot to mention some other things because there's so much to discuss in this book, but also I didn't want to copycat what other people have said, because yes, I've watched other videos and other people have said stuff. You know, just trying to bring my own thing to it, give it my own little sparkle, my own little spiel. But there's also a character named like Gruff, who's like in charge of all these mages in the army. And he like will just put like Otorial like on top of it, like just like rub it on, like dust of it, so that, you know, the mages can't like do anything to him, which I think is really interesting because he of course is, you know, in charge of all of them, but he has no magic power, so that's cool. But moving on. So as the flood is going down, Warbiatch is trying to save the day, but she's not powerful enough. Not enough people worship her. But Rant is done with people dying, and he gives Warbitch the strength to kind of. There you go, I said it. Frick. I even mean to. I was just trying to say what I had to say. Damn. I said it. I'm losing my mind. It's like 5 a.m. right now. That actually slipped me up completely. But I'm not editing this out, because I think it's a little funny that I just, like, shocked myself. Anyway, as I go. Anyway, Rant saves her, is the point. And Rant, like, gives all this, you know, like, energy to her. And it doesn't stop the flood, but it does allow time for other people and stuff. And, you know, the war B word continues to survive, which is good. Gower and Nilgan part ways with Rant. It's really sad because I really love them. but that is how it goes. And then the epilogue, Ohms possibly going to attempt to assassinate Malik Rel. That's kind of what the feeling I got about what he was saying, but I don't know. So that'll be interesting to see whatever happens moving forward. But overall, I mean, it's just so good, and there's so much theming and stuff that I didn't really mention. But from the themes of innocence to the themes of redemption to everything, rape happens a lot in the Malazan universe, but I do appreciate how every time Erickson does it, there's always a point to it. I do think like it happens like every book, and it's like I never thought I'd read so much about this terrible, terrible topic in my entire life, but here I am. It's crazy, and yet it still somehow affects me every time it's mentioned. So there is that too. Um, but I really enjoyed it. It's maybe not the best thing ever in terms of what Erickson has already put out, but it's still really solid. And I really, really like this one. And I love Rand. I just immediately fell in love with the character of Rand. He's so sweet and wholesome, and I just want to give him a big hug and tell him everything's going to be okay, and I'll be your best friend forever. I love you, man. It's okay. He deserves it. To Gower and Ilgan, like some of the funniest. They're one of the funniest duos, actually. I think. I mean, Gower's a little bit more straightforward. Nilgan's just a riot. I'm not gonna lie. I love Nilgan. Um, and Damask, like Damask is just such a interesting character unto himself, and um, again, despite what he's done, despite who he is, it really endeared me to him in this book, really quickly. And of course, the Malazan soldiers continue to be extremely entertaining. The ones that only ones that really stand out to me are Banger and Stillwater. Banger, again, I didn't really mention he's really good with like illusions and stuff, and Stillwater's a whole beast of herself, but I really enjoyed them. Um, and even Spindle being back. I mean, I never had strong feelings toward him in Book of the Fallen, but to see him back after all these years and to see him kind of being like the head poncho now is kind of crazy. Honcho, not poncho. What the frick am I, dude? I'm tired. Um, um, and a year down the line, I can't wait to talk to Brennan about this book as well. But it's been a joy, and all I have left is Forge of the High Mage, and then I'll have to wait like the rest of you to read the next story. Though, upload wise, depending on when the next book by Erickson comes out, I may have read that before you watch this, so that'll be interesting. But there's so much to talk about this book. I think I talked about what I wanted to, though. I always feel like I don't do these books adequate justice. I always feel like there's more I could say. But everything that can be said, AP Canavan and Philip Chase already said anyway, right? It's just like, why am I even here? But this is my perspective and my take, and that's all I can really do is give you my thoughts from my point of view. And if you're anything like me, I mean, I go out of my way to watch people talk about books that I've already read because I'll never be able to experience it the same way the first time again. I gotta watch everybody talk about it. I did that with the Star Wars Expanded Universe, and I'm doing it with Malazan. So Malazan. But and I just want to say to all the new people who showed up because of Malazan, like, thank you. And it's been a joy and a pleasure to go through this series. And I may have been stupid sometimes, okay, a lot of the time, but it was always a joy to read this series because it's so good, and I've never been so invested in something before. Because I love the Star Wars Expanded Universe, but it still requires the films. But this is like all original, all new, and I fell in love with it. So I'll always hold a place in my heart. But we got one more to go. I got one more to savor and enjoy before I must wait, like everyone else, on more stories. But I'll see you then, and I don't know. Someone you care about, go give them a big hug, okay? Maybe your mom. Alrighty. Till next time.